Welcome to the channel. I'm Matthew Hume, and today I wanted to talk about a topic that's really kind of near and dear to my heart, and it's a question that I get a lot of times, and it's, I think I want to be an architect, and what does it take to be an architect? What does that process look like? I just wanted to take a little bit of time today to go through my experiences when I was younger, leading up to my decision to become an architect, and also talk a little bit about the skill sets that one would need in order to be an architect. I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about what it does take, what kind of skills one should have in order to consider architecture as a potential career. And then ultimately I wanted to just give a brief outline of what the steps are involved in the process to become an architect. What should I be thinking about if architecture feels like it's for me and I want to take the next steps to chase after that dream. Thinking back to when I was younger, I was really big into nature. I grew up in the sort of outskirts of town in Pavilion, New York on Asbury Road. It was a really beautiful place to grow up. We had a lot of farms around us, a lot of farm fields, a lot of woods, and that's where I spent most of my time growing up, was, running through the fields with my dog, hunting, fishing, spending a lot of time out in nature. When I think back to it, it's those memories that really kind of were the initial spark to my love for architecture. I remember very specific occasions when I was pretty little where I would be, making a fort in a hedgerow or something like that. And I remember laying on my back and looking up through the grapevines that had sort of taken over a tree that I was hanging out in. And I was always doing that. I was always finding spaces. And in this particular circumstance, it was kind of interesting because the grapevines made this really cool structure over top of me, almost like a teepee or something like that. And I remember laying down inside and underneath that natural structure, and it was a sunny day, looking up through it and looking at the light coming up through. I could feel really inspired by nature. I remember doing that on many occasions. That was always like one of my favorite things to do, was to look up. I would lay underneath our family Christmas tree and I would do the same thing. And to just see the space is incredible. Me and my cousin spent a lot of time, running through the woods together and hunting and stuff. And we also spent a lot of time building forts. Near his house was a waterfall, and we had a lot of fun playing around that waterfall. And it was one of those waterfalls that actually had a really big drop off with like a hollow space behind the water. So you could actually go in behind the water. And I just remember that was also a really incredible spatial experience. A lot of times I found beauty in those moments. It was like not really spaces that were meant for people, but when you would occupy them, and it just felt incredible. I remember another occasion when I was in 4th grade during reading time. We had this really cool window, extra thick walls at the school. And during reading time, there was a bookshelf in front of a part of the window, and I would kind of tuck myself behind the bookshelf, and I would be in this really cool interstitial space between inside and outside. It kind of felt like I was both inside and outside at the same time, and it was on the 2nd story of the building, so I could look out at the playground and I could look out at the track and just kind of hang out there and enjoy reading my book. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I enjoy reading this book so much more because I'm in this really interesting space. So those were and I've had many, many more examples of little moments like that in my childhood that really influenced me. It became more obvious actually as I got older and thought back at those moments. But when I was a teenager, my dad started building houses, and I remember specific instances where, I started as a builder, and I really loved building. I always have loved to build, even back when I was building the tree forts with my cousin. So when I got to do it professionally with my dad's home building company, it just felt natural. It just felt good. And I always had an eye for the spaces. So the houses we were building, we didn't design them, but I remember sometimes just really appreciating some of the moves the architects had made. And I remember one instance, we were building a really beautiful kind of craftsman style home out in the woods. It was, this couple had a really beautiful lot, and it was kind of overlooking this ravine with water flowing through it. And it was really densely wooded. It was like just a beautiful old hardwoods situation. And they had kind of like a 3 Seasons room off the back of the house, and it was overlooking that situation. And I remember thinking to myself, as we're framing this thing, that this thing was severely lacking windows. I was like maybe 16, and I remember thinking to myself, they have to do something about this. So I think it was Wednesday mornings, we would get together with the owners in the morning over coffee and donuts, and we would kind of walk through the progress on the job with them. And I remember saying to them, I was like, this is a really great space. I love it, but what if you were to add a couple windows here and here? And the homeowners were like, yeah, that's a really, really good idea. And so we ended up, they ended up taking my suggestion, and we added a couple more windows that really just kind of made that space. And I was leaving that day from work with my dad, and I remember him looking at me, and he said, you should be an architect. And I was like, I think that's the moment where the dream sort of began for me. The idea that I could be on the job like that and help work through design decisions with homeowners, and then sort of be along the entire journey with them to actually see the thing become a reality. And I just remember that day going home from work just feeling super excited. I think a lot of kids, when they're in their teens, they have a lot of anxiety about, who am I going to become? They start to think about, what are my skill sets? What do I want to do with my life? And I feel like that was kind of a blessing for me, was to be able to have that moment where I was like, aha, this is definitely what I want to be doing. I think if you're considering architecture, think about your past, think about the experiences you've had. If space kind of excites you, architecture might be for you. If you enjoy being in a place and just sort of absorbing the way the light comes through, or the view that you get, could be at your grandma and grandpa's house, or whoever's house, anybody maybe a certain church that you go to, if you really enjoy that space. Architecture might just be for you. I think it's not something that, not everybody has this aha moment where they're like, oh yes, I definitely need to do this. I spent a lot of time as a freshman coordinator for the freshman year at the School of Architecture and Planning at UB. And a lot of the work that I did was to meet with students and help them through, I did a lot of guidance counseling. A lot of freshman students in college, they've kind of committed to a degree. They don't fully understand if that's exactly what they want to be doing, but not everybody has that aha moment. And in my experience, a lot of those students came to architecture because they had certain skill sets that they thought might be applicable, and they did have a kind of a base love for experiencing spaces. And that love may have come out of a variety of different sources, like I was talking about earlier, maybe grandma and grandpa's house, maybe church, maybe whatever. It could be a number of different things, maybe nature, like me. So if that's you, I would consider architecture. I wanted to take a few minutes to elaborate on what it takes to be an architect, the sort of skill sets that you might need in order to become an architect. And I think it's kind of important to unpack this, because I think a lot of people have some preconceived notions about what it takes to be an architect, and one of them that I can think of right off the top of my head is that, oh, you have to be incredibly good at math. I don't think that's true. I think you have to understand basic algebra and geometry. I don't think you have to get into advanced calculus or, physics or any of that stuff. I think it's important to know, and you'll study that when you're in school for architecture. But basic math skills are really all you need to get by. So that's one of the biggest preconceived notions. It's helpful to understand math, but it's not the most important thing. Another skill set that's really important, I think, is to have a little bit of an artistic spirit to you. So maybe you like photography, maybe you like drawing, maybe you like any kind of artistic medium. Art is an important part of becoming an architect. I think having, like I said, some sort of an artistic spirit at your core helps, a lot. As an architect, you have to be pretty creative, and that's where the artistic side comes in. There's a lot of thinking about space, putting yourself in other people's positions, understanding how people might perceive or see things, how they might move through a space, thinking about how they'll feel while they're in a space. And all of that plays an important role. Being a conceptual thinker, I think, is very important. Another kind of skill set that I think is important, but not 100% necessary, is understanding the built environment. Like if you were one of those kids that was out there building forts, or maybe you had an uncle that you did work for, remodeling, or maybe you were like me and you got some home building experience or any kind of building experience when you were younger. That is a very helpful skill set, but it's not 100% necessary in order to become a really great architect. I truly believe that most architects should have some building experience. Maybe even consider, working for a builder for a while out of high school before you even go to architecture school. I don't think that that's a bad idea. I think if you're going to draw and detail buildings and tell other builders how to build things, I think it's helpful to know how to build them yourself. So I think that right there has always been at the heart of my passion for both construction and design, or design and construction. I put design first because that's always what happens first before construction, and that's important. But it's really the combination of the two that is my true passion. And I believe that build experience is a very important sort of prerequisite to being an architect. But that's kind of it. Grade level, I think it does take good grades in order to get into architecture school to begin with. So if you're like me and you didn't have the best grades in high school, you can overcome that. The way I overcame that was I went to community college for a couple of years while building buildings after high school. And I just did gen eds. I did general education classes like, college algebra, English, world civ, stuff like that. I kind of got all of those things done and out of the way, really focused on getting a really high GPA. I got a 4.0 in both the 2 years leading up to me going to architecture school. And that was enough to, I guess, overcome my lack of academic effort, if you will, when I was in high school. So if you haven't done that well in high school and you want to be an architect, don't let bad grades or your past be a detriment. Don't let that distract you from doing what it is that you want to do. And I would say that for anything, if you want to be a doctor, it doesn't matter what you want to be. A lawyer, you want to design spaceships, I don't care what it is. Don't let your past performance affect future results, because people change. They can do, their priorities change, just like mine had after high school. Architecture and my career became really important for me, so I was able to right the ship, and if you're in that boat, you can too. So I want you to know that.